In this lesson, we're going to create an artwork that is inspired by Haider Ali Jan, and we're going to be using Illustrator and then importing the Illustrator vector image into Photoshop to combine it with a photographic background. There are several different ways to open a project in Illustrator. Primarily, I can go File, New. That will give me preset options and sizes to choose from, so blank canvases of different sizes, or alternatively, there's a capacity to enter in my own custom sizing. I can also go into Open. This is for an existing project that you've already started working on or for a photograph that you're going to use. If you have already started using something, it may come up here in your Recent section when you first load Illustrator, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open this image. Now I can zoom into my image in two different ways. I've got a magnifying glass here. Just make sure you're selecting the actual image, otherwise it zooms into the grey. Alternatively, if you're using your laptop, I can hold down the Alt key and use my mouse to scroll in and out. Now today what I want to do is I want to create a figure like this artist Haider Ali Jan from this figure, and then I'm going to import it into a new photograph, a new composition. There's lots of different ways that you can do this. I think one of the easiest is using this pencil tool. The pencil tool allows for free-flowing movement, so you can use your pen or your mouse. It creates outlines if you wish, so the stroke, and you can choose to fill the colour in. So let's choose a yellow for the inside, and maybe for the outside, let's choose a pink colour. Now I can change the width of that line here in stroke. I can make it very thin or very fat. I can go back later and change those colours very easily. I'm also going to need different layers. You should have something called layers. If your workstation doesn't look like mine, it doesn't have all these complex settings at the top, you may need to change your workspace to automation rather than essentials. But once you've done that, you should have the layers tab. Now, I don't want to accidentally move this photo or do anything to it, so I'm going to go down here and hover in the blank space next to the little eye, and it says toggle lock. So I'm going to lock that layer, and now I can't accidentally do anything to it. The eye means I'm just going to turn that layer on and off. Down here, you can see that I've got a little pop-up that says create new layer. I'm going to select that. If I double click there, I can call this skin. Let's choose a more appropriate skin tone for my figure. And I'm simply going to use my mouse to draw. And then I'm going to close the shape. Now you can see I've made a couple of little errors and I haven't included the body yet. So I'm just going to start at one of those anchor points, not releasing the mouse, and join it up to another anchor point, and it will just increase that shape. If I don't like how jagged some of the lines are, I can go into my smooth tool and smooth it out. Now that line's very thick, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to these complex settings and change it to a lesser line stroke. Now you can see the nose still isn't right. If you're a perfectionist, you can actually rechange it over and over again. So I'm just selecting that pen tool, and I'm not going to start a new shape. I'm just going to work back into what I've already done. And you can change it quite significantly. So I can get rid of my nose altogether. Looks a bit weird. There you go, now it's a pointy nose that this little girl has. Okay, I've made the decision just to have one skin blob instead of the individual parts because the clothing's going to go over the top anyway and it was much quicker. So I'm going to hide that layer by turning the eye off and lock it so I can't accidentally do anything to it and create a new layer. And I'm going to call this layer clothing. This is best practice because sometimes it's very hard to discern what layer means what, especially when you've got maybe 5 or 6 different layers with color in them. So I'm going to zoom in, and again, I'm not worried about the lines or the tone just yet. I can add that in later. I'm just going to work into the big areas of color. So selecting my tool and choosing an appropriate color for togs. And remember, you can change them very easily later. Starting on an anchor point and finishing on an anchor point if I want to make any alterations. You can see my skin's a bit weird. If I unlock that layer, whoop, I can make sure that it's not going to be doing anything weird. And remember, we're not going to keep the photograph underneath. And so if I'm not as flabby there, if the little girl's not as flabby there as she should be, it doesn't actually make a difference. But you can sit and get it perfect if you want. Okay, so she definitely needs hair. So she's looking a little bit mannequin-y with a decapitated head. So let's lock that layer and call this one hair. Exactly the same process. I'm going to choose a color. I'm going to give it a big bold area. I may not give it an outline this time, and then I can put some extra tones in. Okay, so adding in finer details like different tones. You can see that I've not got a black outline here. And I'm going to draw a line here, make it brown. Okay, now that doesn't really look like hair because it's got a really hard edge, but this one looks more organic. So what I've done is I've selected the line, I've gone up here, and you can choose different styles. I've also changed the color of the hair in the background and the hair in the foreground because there would be natural shadowing. Like that. A bit more natural. And you can just fill that in and put lots of different tones in. Okay, close enough, good enough. And I'm now essentially going to do the same thing for the facial features. You could put this into Photoshop and draw into Photoshop instead, but I mean, we're already in Illustrator, so why not? I'm still going to use that one tool. I'm going to use the outline instead of the fill, and I can do red lips, I can do the black eye sort of shapes and eyelashes, and then I can do a coloured fill circle for the iris, I guess. Okay, so we can see the facial features are building, starting to look like a real human being. As we've changed the colour with the hair, we can start putting those sorts of tones in on the skin. So if I turn all of these layers off, that looks a bit crazy, crazy. I can see that I've got some dark areas. So if I make a new skin layer, put it over the top, and let's call it skin shadow, I'm going to not use a stroke. I am going to use the same color, so I select that. And I'm using the same color so that I can open this up and choose something that is maybe just a bit darker. And I'm going to draw on some shadowy bits. So like this area in here is a little shadowy. Let's make that one darker because it's very shadowy. and just keep building in. So it'll look better and better the more you put in. And then I'm going to have my little figure. Now I'm going to go File, Save As, save it somewhere intelligent, not your desktop. And keep it as an Adobe Illustrator file, save. The next stage requires some discernment. Now at the beginning I mentioned that we can open new documents with custom sizing and large sizing. However, because I wanted to trace from a photograph, this image is as big as the photograph is. Now if I make Illustrator a bit smaller, I can show you that this is actually 800%. So the actual image is that small. However, the good thing about Illustrator is that none of these lines have pixels. The photograph does, and if I make the photograph any bigger, it will be very, very pixelated. But the lines, I could zoom in forever and I'll never get a pixel. So what I now need to do is bring that image into Photoshop. But if I import the image as it is, it's going to be super tiny. It'll be about the same size as that little boy and very blurry if I try and make it big. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go File, New, and I'm going to choose a large scale canvas. For your purposes, we probably won't bother printing it any bigger than an A3 document. However, in Year 12, you may want your digital artwork to take up a whole wall. And if that's the case, you can choose how many centimeters your composition is going to be. You can make a custom composition and make it as big as you want. But for my purposes, I'm going to choose A3 because I know that that photograph is about that size. So the beach photograph I want to import it onto. So now I've got that new blank composition. So all I need to do now is copy and paste my figure in. Now I don't want the background layer because as I showed you, I'm going to put her in a beach setting. So turn that off and I can go File, Save As, and again choose somewhere intelligent like your OneDrive, and I'm just going to save it as no background like I already have. File, Open, Desktop, and there it is. Open. Pages, OK. So you can see it's got no background. It's all one object now. She's completed. So Control A for select all, Control C for copy, and then Control V for pasting it in. And to make it bigger or smaller, Control T, hold down the Shift button so it doesn't distort, and to move her around.